What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Everything Horror Podcast. And I am Paul Dolsky. And tonight, I must say, I have a very special guest tonight because, I don't really know if you guys may have heard of the pixelated game known as Home, where it's kind of like your choose your own adventure. It's multiple endings and very creepy, atmospheric type of game anyway. But and then he went on to do Alone with You, and then he's planning on coming back with another game called Worse Than Death, which sounds very interesting nonetheless. But anyway, let's get him on board. Benjamin Rivers. Thank you, Benjamin, for allowing me to talk with you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always
Hey,
happy to talk to horror fans.
well, I definitely appreciate it. And for those that may not know, Benjamin here is Canadian, which is cool. I mean, I don't think really get that many Canadians on here, but nonetheless, it's always nice to see that. Let's just put it this way: Canadians seem to be doing something right in the horror genre that the U.S. is completely not doing right, which is actually making original content. But I think that's a whole new story in a different episode to begin with. But anyway, Benjamin. So, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you even got into the horror genre to begin with?
Sure. It's funny. I'm sure a lot of people say this, but I don't feel like I got into horror. I feel like horror got into me because I've loved horror stories, movies, comics, books, whatever, from as long as I can remember. But yeah, so I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and grew up in a series of sort of small towns, which are excellent places to sort of get creeped out. Um, and I used to watch horror movies with my older brother as early as I can remember. I remember him like locking me in a room and making me watch Hellraiser, like in the '80s, just because he was a terrible older brother. And so we would just watch scary stuff all the time. I love comics, and I would just sort of get like used copies of old EC horror comics, like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, stuff like that. And it was just always something I was into. And I've said to my wife recently, like, happiness for me is knowing that I get to come home and play a horror game at some point. Like anything that's got like a spooky house in it where you're roaming around in the dark. I don't know what it is, but it's just always been part of who I am. So making horror games is kind of an honor.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, Benjamin, how I even found you. I think it was just Home. I know it was Home, but like I just don't remember if it was just me randomly, just like at back to when I was a little bit younger. Because right now, when did what was that? 2008 when Home came out. Please
The
remind me.
the first version of Home was for like PC and Mac on Steam, and that was actually 2012, so 7 years ago.
Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah, time flies.
Tell
All
me
right.
about it.
Well, um, geez, God, I want to say Steam was definitely the first place, but I think I really got into Home more when it came to console because I'm more of a console guy, and plus at the time, I didn't really trust my laptop for games, even though I didn't really. Uh, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't really like think my laptop would be good enough for be considered as like a gaming laptop. So I didn't really do much of a laptop game or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I first played Home on PlayStation
Hmm.
whenever that was. God, wow. I don't remember when I actually got it, but either way, like I fell in love with it there. Like I started to like the pixelated stuff just because, and I'm curious, is it just because you decided what a pixelated atmosphere of the game? Is it because like a throwback, a nostalgia type of game, or or what? But like just the idea of it, I guess alone was just like really cool with the creep factor of like it's just you in a world where something's going on. You got your own choose your adventure, and it's really neat how you did that. So, how did Home really just like get inspired by you?
Yeah, so I can answer all that stuff. So regarding the art style, so in my previous life, before I was a game developer full time, I was a graphic designer, and I did that for about 15 years or so. And one thing when you're a designer is you work on jobs like like most or like a lot of other kinds of work do, where you get briefs and you have a bunch of things you can and can't do, and you've got to figure out what you're going to do within the constraints of that particular project. So when we worked on home. It was my wife and I. We decided to kind of create. Well, we created a design document, but we created a bunch of artificial constraints, and we tried to think about what would make something interesting. And it was like a little bet. So the idea was that I bet you can make a horror game that is really really low res, just 2D, and you could still make it really scary, and people would engage with it. They would find it creepy. They creep themselves out. They'd be talking about it. Like I bet that could be done. And at the time when Home came out, there were very few independent horror games, but also the horror genre in sort of the gaming space had been in a bit of a lull. There had been some stuff, but there wasn't a lot. And in fact, the year that Home came out, there's a bunch of other like really cool indie horror games that came out as well, and sort of kicked off a bit of a resurgence. And now there's like lots of amazing horror games from sort of real low budget stuff to real high budget stuff, which is obviously awesome. So that was kind of how we decided to approach that. And then, as the game sort of progressed in development, we were like, hey, this actually is really creepy. Like, I think this is going to work. And we sort of just trusted our gut and made it happen.
Fair enough. And so, just to be clear, your wife is also into horror, just like you.
Okay, that's an excellent question. Into horror would be stretching it. She's definitely into laughing at me because I'm screaming watching like a horror movie, and she thinks it's funny. But there are certain things I'll try to watch, and she's like, I think I'm just gonna go to the office and go get some work done while you watch this movie. So I'm the horror fan, but she she likes making fun of me for watching horror stuff and consuming horror content. So I guess that's her sort of her gateway into the horror world.
Fair enough. There is times where like my fiance and I are watching something or whatever, and she'll get spooked, and I'll just turn to her like, "Really? Like that shit scared you?" And she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
So I'm just like, "Ay ay ay." So yeah. So everybody said that I'm very hard to scare. Like I always say is I need a challenge, I guess, to scare me. So the challenge is scare me, and if you can scare me, then you'll be the first person to scare me in like years, sort of thing. Like, yeah. So, but good luck.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so funny. People approach horror very differently. Like some people love jump scares, some people love like psychological stuff, some people love the tension and whatnot. And yeah, especially with games, everything's a little bit different. Every game's a little bit different. The way you approach it has its drawbacks and advantages. And I'm always nervous when I make horror content because I know, like, if I go to a theater and watch a film and I'm just losing my mind because I'm so scared. It's like eating really spicy chicken wings. Like there's a point where the spice becomes too much, and you're not even enjoying yourself. You're just doing it for the challenge of it. And I think with some horror content, it's kind of like that too. Now there are days when I'm like, all I want to do is eat the world's spiciest chicken wings, or go watch this movie that I'm terrified to see, or play this game that is absolutely freaking me out. But there's definitely other times when I think like I want like a simmering horror. I want to feel like creeped out, but I don't want to be like losing my mind, not being able to get out of bed because I'm too scared in the middle of the night kind of horror.
Oh, jeez. Well, I think Tessa was just about to say something, and then of course she just walked away. So I don't know what was going on. Tessa, Tessa, what were you gonna say?
I was going to correct you.
Oh, here.
Uh
Hang on.
oh.
So
Uh
here we
oh.
go, folks. Here's the correction from Tessa Baker. Here we go.
It doesn't scare me. Sometimes certain parts of movies startle me. Like, I'm so into the movie that when something like pops up in my face, it's like, whoa, okay. But it doesn't scare me.
Don't listen to her. Anyway.
Don't listen to him.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh man. Well, she played your game too, Benjamin, and she like enjoyed it too, and now she's giving me the slap around the face thing. So if she has anything, she'll drop in when she can too. But unfortunately, like sometimes me and her almost tend to like have the same wavelength or mind wave, whatever you want to call it.
Wavelength.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
we think on the same wavelength. So 9 times out of 10, something I'm going to ask or talk about, he's already got it covered. So.
That's great. That's good. That's where you want to be.
Yes, and speaking of the lovely country of Canada. Now, did you and your wife check out that one film that was actually filmed? Or well, there's quite a few, but the one particular I'm thinking of is called The Void.
No, not yet. I've heard of this, but I have not yet. There's actually a ton of horror stuff that's filmed here, and like
Yes.
on all sort of levels of things. Like both It movies were filmed here in Toronto. The second Resident Evil movie was filmed here in Toronto. A bunch of George Romero movies are filmed here. There's tons of stuff that gets filmed around here, and there's lots of like I think more horror television content that gets filmed, maybe more in Vancouver. But there's always we probably have really good recipes for blood and gore hidden in a production studio somewhere.
Right, exactly. Yeah, another one that came across. Well, two that I came across too, which I'm curious to see if you heard of them. One is called Darken, and another one is called the UKM, which is the Ultimate Killing Machine.
No, I have not. I love that title.
Wow. Well, Darken is very cool. That's all practical effects based on like a futuristic world, like in another realm per se, in the modern world. So it's very cool. And then there's this other one, just like a super soldier movie, which is the UKM, the Ultimate Killing Machine. It's very interesting. So, yeah. So that's very interesting. I guess those, if you wanted to check out, is definitely worth a shot. I mean, if you like practical effects, then I think you would love The Void.
Oh yeah, totally. That sounds right up my alley.
And one cool thing that we found out, I forget the guy's name right now, but he played one of the monsters in The Void. And what you see of him, though, is what he can actually do with his body. He can move his body in the most unhumanly way that it's just like, huh? So it's just like, if you can find his name, or if I find his name, I'll try to contact you, and I'll like send you the proof that this guy can like move his body in ways that a human should not be able to move his damn body. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. When they filmed the first Silent Hill movie, actually that wasn't filmed in Toronto. Well, some of it was filmed in Toronto. A bunch of it was filmed in a town about an hour and a half from here. They had, what was it? They had dancers and a bunch of stage performers do a lot of the monsters, because they could do that. They could do sort of like double jointed movements and whatnot, just to make things look very unsettling.
Oh wow, I don't even think I even knew that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, all of the town segments in Silent Hill were filmed at a place called Brantford, Ontario. And
you actually know that's actually.
Yeah, well, like,
you know,
sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, it's fine. I'm trying not to interrupt you, but you know that Silent Hill was actually also based on the real place in Pennsylvania, right? Where they say like the underground is like still burning with fire or something after all those years.
Yeah, that's right. Centralia is the name of the place, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds correct. But yes, anyway, go on.
I mean, like, I remember the first time I found that out that Silent Hill was filmed here, I was so excited. And the second movie, which is not great, or not even really good, it was
moments.
Yeah, it was also filmed here. And actually, my wife and I took a walk one summer, the summer they were filming it, and they had there's the scene where they're in the carnival, with like the merry-go-round from the game, and all the set stuff was still sort of laid out. There's like a beach area where they'd filmed all that stuff, and we'd sort of wandered. And I'm like, wait a minute, because the signs that were on some of the structures were from the game, and I'm like, holy crap! I think we just found the Silent Hill 2 set, but they hadn't like packed everything up yet. They had just sort of shuttered it and I've left it there to take away later.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so if you watch Resident Evil 2, and you see the part at the end, spoiler, where they blow up Umbrella Labs or Umbrella headquarters, that's actually our city hall that they quote unquote exploded.
Is that the? I think I might be getting my Resident Evil mixed up. Is that Nemesis? Was that number 2?
Did they call it Nemesis? Oh boy, I think you might be right. It was the first time they had Jill Valentine in the movie.
Oh no, wait. I might be getting the name wrong. Hang on. It has Nemesis in it. Crap. Apocalypse, I think. Resident Evil Apocalypse, maybe?
Yeah. They all have, it's funny, they have such a long running franchise now. I can't remember what any of the subtitles are. I just know it's the second one. Because the first one was just Resident Evil. And it was like Regeneration or something like that. I can't remember, but oh no, Regeneration was the CGI film. Doesn't matter. That's right. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's really cool though. But yeah, you were saying with home, so like you were a graphic designer, you were doing some stuff, and then the picturated came from. I think I remembered you saying like you and your wife talking about, well, we could make it 2D. And we can get away with making it creepy, yada yada yada. And then I'm trying to remember what you just said. So
no, that was basically it. I mean, the whole idea was that we had only sort of so many resources, and we wanted to make a game. Like Home was originally meant to be a jam game. Like I thought, I could just bang this out in a weekend, which of course was not entirely true. And I just sort of was working on it while doing other things, but it only took about 6 months to do. Actually, it was quite quick.
Oh, wow.
When you add up all the time. And then when we did it, we're like, that's cool. I think this is going to be good. And then we just sort of lucked out. It blew up real big, and it was kind of right, being at the right place at the right time, which is fantastic. And then we started noticing, holy crap, people are totally into indie horror games. And as someone again who loves horror movies, and at that time in the city there were still lots of movie rental places. The streaming hadn't happened yet, and you mostly got, if you're watching stuff, you're mostly renting it from the store. So we had this amazing. We're very lucky in the city. We have amazing theaters, but we also had a amazing series of sort of independent rental places. And there was this one I used to go to all the time called Queen Video, and they had essentially bins with just the flat folded DVD or VHS covers. So you could flip through them like you're flipping through a box of vinyl records, and then you could they had so much content there that they could sort of store this way and display. And I used to just go and pick a genre. So one summer it was Italian horror. I realized, you know what, I don't know a damn thing about Italian horror movies. I'd never seen any. So I just started going through and watching a bunch of those, and then finding some sort of obscure stuff, or like the creepy, dark underground films, or slasher movies. And then really got an appreciation for just really tight, quick, and condensed storytelling, where you're not telling this giant epic drama, but you're telling a movie in a tight 90 minutes, and you get these amazingly memorable scenes that people carry with them for the rest of their lives. So doing stuff like Home was kind of like that too, where we thought, we're not trying to make the world's biggest horror experience. We're just trying to make something that people will play in one sitting, if possible, and will carry with them forever because they're traumatized by it or something like that.
Well, I don't know if they could do it in one. Well, hang on. Let me rephrase this. They could probably do it in one sitting, like I probably did. Maybe a couple tries or something, because maybe it got too late at night or whatever when I was playing it. But let's see. If memory served me right, there's 3 endings to the game, which I won't say just in case for some weird reason somebody had not played Home.
Mm-hmm.
But how did, if you can, without saying too much, how did you figure out ways to end the game multiple ways, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because that was the toughest part of the development process. So when we started, the game started because I'd written a short story. I'd written part of a short story, totally slacked off on it. And I looked at it one day when we were coming up like coming up with an idea to make something scary, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty good setup. Like I could do something with this. It was almost like a screenwriting class when you realize, oh, this is a cool first page for a story. I just don't know what the rest of the story is. So we started with that, and that was about the man waking up in the room in a sort of a house that's not his. And then from there, I started to piece together, okay, so what is he trying to do? What is he going to uncover? What's going to happen as you sort of play through? And for people who haven't played Home, the way it works is that your choices matter not just like at the ending, but they matter throughout the story. So depending on things you essentially look at or don't look at, you will have access to other options. And it's meant to be very organic, where we don't tell you what's going on. There's no like icon that comes on the screen that says like, oh, you've made this choice and now you've filled like your plot number 2 meter or anything like that. It's just something that's you're meant to sort of think about as you play. So the difficulty of that is that sometimes when you play a game like like with Telltale games, they tell you very specifically, when you do something that impacts something later on, and they often tell you at the end of a chapter what you did, what other people did, the kind of percentages, and you sort of get a bit of a lay of the land of what your options are. But we wanted to, with Home, obfuscate everything so that you never knew what you were doing and how that specifically affected the game. And because we wanted people to talk to each other, to say like, hey, I played Home. Wasn't it crazy when you do this in the end? And then someone else would say like, what are you talking about? That's not how the game ends at all. And then you realize there's a discussion to be had. So to answer your question about how we came up with the endings, a lot of it was figuring out, following a path, like basically writing a path that made sense, and then realizing at certain moments, oh yeah, but you know what? If you think about it, there's more than one answer to this particular node on this path. So let's just, make a note and come back to that, and let's flesh this out a little bit later. So one question I get a lot is, people ask me if there's a canonical, like official ending to Home. And some people get mad at me, like even 7 years later, I get these angry emails. People are like, what the hell is the actual thing that happens in Home? Like, tell me.
And I bet I know the answer that you're Mike going to say is pretty much it's just like, well, I don't know if it's the way you probably word it, but it could be any ending is really the real ending, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people say like, "Oh, you're just copying out," but that's the literal answer. Like the whole point is that none of the particular endings and none of the choices you make are wrong. So in my mind, when I wrote it, and since you played the game, you might sort of remember some things. But in my mind, there are 5 very, very distinct ways to interpret the story. That we wrote down very specifically. We kind of had kept like a running note to say like, okay, if you can interpret, if there's a moment that we want you to be able to interpret, it has to work with any of these 5 branches, and they're pretty sort of fairly wide ranging. So everything has to make sense from that particular branch, so that you could never go back and say like, well, this is stupid. If the ending is X, then clearly this is just like a crappy piece of writing. This is never intended to be interpreted in any other way. So we had to make sure to do that. So when the game was coming out, like I had all these charts and spreadsheets and stuff. Like the office totally looked like it was a serial killer. Like just all the stuff on the walls to be like, okay, so if you choose this, what does this mean for this choice and this choice and all that kind of stuff. And I tried to make it very organized, like a lot of games do, where there's like path A, B, C, D, and whatnot. And then I quickly realized, like, that's not how this game works. It's not a linear. It's not like you're filling out one of 5 columns. It is meant to be a bit more chaotic, and you're never supposed to be able to quite pin down exactly where you are in sort of the web of what's going on. So I have these notebooks, and I still have them, like with the notes of the different interpretations, and they're all written out on these like double spread pages, and they just look like murder notebooks. Like they look crazy, just sketches and scratches and all these notes about who's doing what and who's dead because of who and all that kind of stuff, and like all these arrows pointing at each other. And the whole point is like I had to be able to look at that like non-linear cloud of noise and say, yeah, okay, well, you can interpret this the right way, you can interpret this the right way, and if you think about it, it still makes sense.
Fair enough. Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's see here. I think I played home, if not 3 times. I know at least twice, if but more, of course, on like console. But I remember playing it on PS4. I remember playing it on let's see, Vita,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see. I'm trying to remember. Did Home come out on? No, I don't think it did. I don't think Home came out on PS3. I think it was only
No.
PS. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
we were on PS4 in 2014. So we wait, is that right? Yeah, 2014. So we had just sort of PS4 and Xbox One had come out in 2013. So we were sort of there, like in the year after launch.
right. Oh, you know what's probably confusing me is when PS3 did the whole cross-buy thing.
Yeah, that's right. Because we had done cross-buy with PS4 and
Vita, yeah,
Vita,
yeah,
but previous to that it was mostly PS Vita and PS3.
right, yep. Yeah, that's probably why I'm thinking PS3. So yeah, yeah, very very interesting. I'm trying to remember like I remember going back because without giving too much away, but I think it would be maybe fair to at least mention one interesting thing that you were talking about too about your choices as you were saying like with Telltale and with this case. For those that may not know, this isn't really going to give too much away, but it's going to help elaborate more of what Benjamin has already said, which is this. There's one part in the game where your main protagonist finds a hole in the floor. Now, you can either do two things here. You can jump down the hole and hurt yourself, where you're going to have a limp. Um, Otherwise, you can find some rope and climb down, where you do not injure your leg. And from doing either of those, there's a potential spot, I'll say, where there's and I'm gonna say is campsite. I believe, if memory serves me right now, because I am kind of going off memory, but it's a campsite, I believe, or at least something important to a I'll say side story. But if your leg is hurt, you cannot. And Benjamin can probably clarify this better than maybe I can, but you cannot cross the water with a hurt leg. However, if your leg is not hurt, you can actually walk across just fine. But yeah, so Benjamin, can you explain about if you recall what I'm trying to say without saying too much is that water part where if you have a hurt leg, you cannot cross that over. Is that supposed to be like a lake, a stream, like so what about this water thing is making it so that your character could not go across with a hurt leg?
Yeah, you nailed it exactly. That's exactly what happens. We and there's like the game actually tracks your steps when you're injured, so that you always limp for a certain amount of time, just so that you're always aware. And if you hurt your leg twice, it lasts longer, and you walk like a little bit slower. Hopefully, not enough to make the game aggravating, but just enough so that you realize that it's a little bit different. So the way I usually write, like when I do comics and stuff and write stories, I don't start with like a beginning, middle, and end and like plot out a master plan. Usually, what happens is there's a scene, like in the case of Home, the beginning, a scene that comes to me or a scene that I've found interesting, and then I go, okay, so how do we get to this moment? Where do we go from this moment? What are the reasons? The characters? Why would they do what they do? And it starts as like a bit of a web from a center, and then we kind of move outward, and then we start filling in the blanks and trying to make good choices about why a character would have certain motivations, and so that makes sense, so that the viewer, reader, or whatnot, or the player is kind of putting these pieces together. And with things like the water, the stream in the forest, like by the campsite, exactly as you said, I think I had just designed the area and said, it feels like, or I just said, well, this is dumb because you shouldn't be able to cross this like slippery, dangerous stream on a broken leg. And I think a lot of that was thinking about older adventure games where like in like an old Sierra game, if you hadn't done something or you did do something, trying to enter a certain area would result in some kind of instant death. And we weren't trying to do anything like that, but it just made sense. So I said, okay, well, there you go. We're just going to put that in. That makes sense in terms of like a narrative callback. So if you don't injure your leg, you can cross and find what's on the other side without having to sort of take a side route. If you have injured your leg, then you definitely have to go find an item to use in order to cross the river. And you can find that item anyway, but you don't have to. And a lot of that was to create that sense of people playing it. Maybe they didn't injure their leg, and then getting to that point because it always hints that something could happen if the situation was a little bit different, so that people would play and say, I wonder what would happen if I jumped down. Because in the early, like, there's streaming didn't exist when the game came out, but we would see some people post on YouTube, and we actually watched some videos like around the launch of people just pausing a lot and kind of seeming frustrated because they weren't sure what to do, and like they were mad at themselves because they were like, oh crap. And they were very hesitant to do certain things because they thought, like, if I jump down this hole, without finding a rope, am I basically just dead? And that was a lot of fun because what we realized was that we had achieved our goal. People were scaring themselves. Like, all we said was, hey, something might happen if you do this. But then people would make themselves nervous and terrified without us having to do anything more. And that was kind of awesome to see.
Well, in that case, I think the first time I played, I did hurt my leg because I was stupid and didn't look everywhere. Or if I did, I completely missed the rope the first time. But I definitely looked at that hole and it was just like, oh, what could be down below or whatever. And I'm like, whatever. Jump down, not thinking of anything. And then, you get that message that's like, oh, you hurt your leg, now you got a limp and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, at least you can get down here. And then I was like beating it the first time. So then when I went back to play again, I was like, okay, how do we not hurt the leg? And then that's when I found the rope. And I'm like, oh, well, I kind of feel like stupid for either missing it or whatever happened the first time around anyway. So I do like that. And what was my favorite part? It was probably... I'm trying to remember the area now. It's the guide job, I believe, is what it was, where he was kind of talking about a coworker. If I'm right.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I don't remember why I liked that, but I think it was just because of the atmosphere, the way the sound was. It definitely did bring up the creep factor, and it's just like Like, I'm waiting for, like, I don't know if anybody maybe had it on YouTube, but I was definitely waiting for something to, like, at least pop out and be like, and stuff, and it's just like nothing came, so it's just like, okay. So they're using the atmosphere to definitely creep you out, thinking that something could pop out any minute.
Oh, yeah, and you know what, as a game designer, that is, quite honestly, the most fun, is it's like you're designing a little theme park where you... are trying to control how people feel about certain things, whether they get like feeling claustrophobic or scared or nervous or, like you say, apprehensive that something is going to jump out. And it's super fun to watch people play, and they're like, I've seen people like just tiptoe through home and they don't want to do anything because they're just waiting for something, even though it might be a completely safe area, but we put them in the mood where they're thinking about that all the time. And as someone, again, who plays horror games, I get the exact same mode, and I'm just like cursing the designers for stressing me out so much.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Now, is there, let's see here. Home, let's see, what can I say? Is there anything else to this that I'm trying to think without giving too much away? I don't think so. However, though, let me see. I'm going to have to check real quick for my notes real quick. Where was it? There it is. Last year, actually, Ben, Home actually got a physical release from limited run games. Now, how did that come to be? I'm just curious, did they have to contact you to ask you, like, hey, would you like to have your game have a physical copy? And if so, like, what would you like to do with it? So, yeah, how do you feel about Home having a limited run game?
Well, that was like a dream come true. It was so cool. Yeah, so the Douglas and Josh were the heads of Limited Run Games, real cool guys. And they're just like so rock and roll. They kind of just came up to me when I was demoing Alone with You at a PlayStation Experience show, and they were like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We're making games on physical disc. Would you be interested?" And at the time, I was like, "I don't know what this is about, and I'm kind of confused." So I was like, "Okay, I don't know, but maybe I'll talk to you guys later." And then eventually I did, and they're like, "Oh, finally came back, huh?" And so I said, like, "So it seems like you guys are making physical games, and this is really awesome." And they said, like, "Yeah, we'd really love to have Home on there for both Vita and PS4." So I said, "Yep, absolutely. That sounds great." And then they were just real nice to work with, and everything kind of just went smoothly from there. Yeah, and the fun thing was when Home first came out. So it came out in Steam in I think it was August 1st, something like that, like August or July of 2012. But it actually had received a very small release on kind of a personal website, like a company website, prior to Steam, just a few months before. And what had happened was we had released a trailer the previous October as part of this competition, and it got picked up by gaming websites. I think Joystick was the one that picked it up the most. And I was just shocked to sort of like check my newsfeed or whatever that one day and realize, holy crap, everyone's talking about this stupid game we're making. And then there was a lot of interest. We were getting emails, and all that was really fun. And then we had kind of planned to do something fun with a physical component, but we didn't quite know what that was. And as time went on, as development went on, I realized, like, oh yeah, I definitely want to make something cool. So, I mean, one of the inspirations for making a physical version of the game was the old Infocom text adventure games from the like late 70s, early 80s, which had these boxes full of cool stuff in them, like ID cards and physical objects and manuals and whatnot. And they nicknamed those feelies. And they were meant to, because the games are so primitive in terms of either having no graphics or very limited graphics and were very narrative driven, they were meant to give you a window into that world by having these cool objects that you interacted with, sometimes within the game itself, and sometimes just outside to sort of build more of the story. And I love that stuff. And again, as a graphic designer, any excuse to sort of make cool stuff was totally up my alley. So we had pitched the pre-orders for the game on our website as having a boxed edition. And then we sold out the pre-orders. We had said there was going to be like 200. It was limited because how many could we actually make, and how many was anyone going to buy? And we sold out of the pre-orders like very quickly, and we're like, oh crap, well, we got to make these things happen. So we did it. Everything was like basically handmade, hand stuffed. And I'm not sure if you've seen these editions, but they had like floppy disks that came with them. They had secret messages on them. They had a letter that you couldn't open until the game told you to. They had a bunch of other things like that were all meant to sort of enhance the experience, like a map that didn't quite make sense and fun stuff. So the game launched with a physical version, of which, again, there were only 200. So when Limited Run reached out, the idea to actually bring like another physical version, but like to a whole bunch of people who are actually going to be interested, and not just the people who had pre-ordered the old version, was extremely exciting. So that was like a no-brainer, super easy, and so awesome to get that done.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed out on it, unfortunately, but that's what happened when bills come into play or rent or whatever happened at that time. And what really sucks too is when you get paid bi-weekly, not even every week, so that even sucks too. So you got to talk about tight budgeting your money, really. So I did see it. I unfortunately just couldn't do it. So I was like, God darn it. Maybe if people demand it, maybe we could see another limited run thing, but who knows? But it would be like a dream come true.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's so cool to see that stuff, and it's anytime someone posts like the game for our second game, Alone with You, our limited run edition just came out, and just I think people have been receiving them over the past few weeks. And so when people post on Twitter and Instagram like unboxing videos of them getting this stuff, it's amazing. Like, whoever thought that would happen?
Right? No, I hear you. Like, I was shocked when I saw Limited Run do a do a physical copy of one of my favorite horror games too, called Layers of Fear. I never would have thought that game would have gotten a physical, but I was so shocked when I saw Limited was doing it. I was like, oh my god, yes, this game definitely deserves it, I think. So, and that's probably one of my favorites too, for like just to throw out there, I guess. I mean, I definitely would recommend that game, just like I would recommend your game too, Benjamin. So, I unfortunately though have not had the chance to check out Alone with You. So, if you could tell us about it for people like me and my fiance who have not played that one yet, of what that is all about. I know it's like a sci-fi romance story.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like a genre of one. I used to joke. It's a very weird game. The way I described it was like it is like an episode of Star Trek meets really awkward online dating. So the whole point is it's an adventure game and it's set in sci-fi. It's a lot longer than Home. It's like I don't know, like 6 hours long or something like that. And you play the last surviving member of a terraforming colony off on this planet somewhere. And it's you and this AI. You're the only ones that left. There's this like terrible tragedies that have happened. People have died, and you and the AI are basically trying to get all these parts and materials you need to repair your escape ship, so you can get off the planet and get back home to Earth. So in order to do that, the AI is like, okay, well, I can help you do some stuff, but like I don't know how to build this ship. However, we have these holograms that are essentially like captured versions of the for the people who used to live here. Again, just like characters in a holodeck, and you can talk to them, and they all have different expertises. They'll tell you how to fix the ship. So you go to these different areas, and it's kind of like it uses like a Persona style cycle, where in the morning you get a mission from the AI, and then you get to choose which of the areas you get to go to. You go do a mission where you're trying to find items, you're uncovering clues, you're solving little puzzles, things like that. You sort of come back to the colony at the end of the day, and then that night you get to go hang out with one of these four holograms, and like spend time with them. So then you end up developing relationships with them, and the trophies and achievements and whatnot are sort of based on all the different choices you make. And it's like just this really, really weird homage to like old Sega CD adventure games, where it has this like crazy color palette, and it's very esoteric and has like lots of high, like, full screen pixel art animations and things like that. And it was, I think after Home, I was like, I don't know if I really want to make this like dark, depressing horror game just yet. So let's make like a bright but equally depressing science fiction game. And then after that, let's go back and make like another really dark horror game.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I mean, Home definitely depended on the ending or endings, like if you got all of them. So then pretty much the quote full story unquote of what could have happened or whatever. But I know with some people, sometimes they have that mindset where they'll beat the game once and that's the ending. And so that might be why, like, as we were talking before, or as you were talking, I believe, where you were bringing up, like, one person would say, like, oh, well, this is the ending I got. And it's like, no, this is the ending. And it's just like, once you know that it's multiple endings, and there's so much more possibilities to a story anyway, where, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is pretty dark, depending on the ending that you get and what you do for choices. And as with Along With You, it already sounds interesting. I've seen the trailer. It looks bright, pretty, not as dark as Home, so it feels like you're more, what's the word I'm looking for? Comfortable. Like, you don't have to worry about turning off the lights and thinking like the boogeyman is outside staring in the window. In this case, you got a nice little story to help, like, just be like, okay, yeah, Home was nice, but this is better because now my nerves can settle down and stuff like that. So, and to answer your question too, Benjamin, is I see on the release date for Home was June 1st of 2012 for Steam.
Oh yeah, okay. Man, it's nuts.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I can only imagine like some of the stuff that like. So, speaking of which, of what I would almost just about to say is, so how long did? So you said Home took 6 months to make. Now is that with writing everything with all the notes, and then and it looks like you actually create the games yourself. So like I'm curious, like when making the game, did you have to either take away anything? Did you have to add anything? Um, walk it through the process. Like, was there any type of way where if you had to talk to your wife, even where you guys were like, well, would this be able to work? And if not, how could we make it work?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things happened for sure. So the 6 months it took to make Home were spread out over a slightly longer time because I was sort of working on client work at the time. So I was sort of fitting in Home between other projects. And so a lot of it was I was learning the tools I was using at the time as well because we make our games right now in Game Maker Studio 2. It wasn't Game Maker Studio 2 back then; it was an earlier version, which is a game making software suite that caters specifically to 2D game design. Makes things super fast to implement and can be very powerful and lets you now port to like damn near everything very quickly. But at the time, there's a lot of things I was just learning to do as a programmer and figure out how to make. So there was things I thought, oh, I'd really like to have a creature or some kind of enemy or whatever. And at first, I was like, I don't even know how to do that. And then later, I realized that I don't even want that. That's not the right approach for sort of this design that we've laid out. In terms of things we added, what's really interesting is most people probably won't remember this, but when the game first came out on Steam, you couldn't save your game.
Oh,
It was a deliberate choice to say you played the game in one sitting or you didn't play it at all, because the general playthrough would be about like an hour and a half if you were sort of like on media, sort of on average. Some people, you could speed run it way faster, but that was
right.
kind of the idea. It was like a movie. You got to sit through the whole movie, and we actually got like put at the magazines and stuff because people were like, "Ooh, brave choice!" Like you're making people play this whole game without saving. But we knew we wanted to make to release the game on iOS, which it came out on iOS in 2013 because it was actually designed as a mobile game, like to work as well on mobile as it did with keyboard or mouse or with a controller. But it just wasn't feasible at the time because of sort of the tools we had available to us. So when we went to do it to release it for iOS, we had to put in the save system because if you're playing your game on a phone and you get a phone call and you leave and then your phone decides to like deprioritize that app and free up memory for something else and you come back and the whole game is reset, you're angry. But we could reliably convince a whole bunch of people on Steam to say, just play the game an hour and a half. Don't worry about it. You'll have a good time. But with a mobile device, that doesn't work as well. So for quite a long time, several months, 3 to 6 months, I can't remember now. You couldn't even save the game. But as well, we had some ideas where there were some areas that we kind of had, like I had in the back of my head, and some rooms, extra rooms that were not available at the beginning of the game. So
Oh,
in Home, there were doors, even in the very first area, that just didn't open. And throughout other areas of the game, there were parts that doors that were closed and sort of just rooms that weren't there. And so I kind of like in an update, I sort of snuck in an entire new area. The train yard was not in the original release; it was sort of added about 3 or 4 months after launch,
mm,
uh, as well as some other rooms that were just sort of made open, so that if you're playing the game again, and especially if you knew it well or you liked it, you would play it and wonder like, what the hell? Why is there a room here all of a sudden? Because we really want to freak people out, like almost like their game was messing with them. Like was the kitchen here the whole time? I don't remember there being a kitchen on the last time I played this. So we kind of secretly added in stuff months after launch to just kind of mess with people and see if anybody noticed, and which was actually a lot of fun.
nice, nice. No, that's definitely interesting to know because that train part when you yeah, gotta find a specific item. I'll just say that was very interesting. I think I actually like that part too, just because it was just more of the like, okay, what's going on here, sort of deal, and then that kind of makes sense for another part too. So that I'll keep hush hush. So interesting. Now, my final question for home, and I don't know if you ever get asked this question about it, but I am curious. Is so how did the whole I'll call it scene come into play or get brought up to either save the mouse or not save the mouse that is trapped?
Oh, that's a really good question. So that is the mouse is the first choice you can make in the game. So that was a game design thing where we wanted you to be able to make a choice that seemed simple and maybe even almost pointless. You know, you see the mouse is trapped, you're like, oh, because it's doing what a lot of the game does. It's telling you something's happening. There's a mouse trapped. It's asking you, what do you want to do? Do you want to free it or not free it? But it doesn't tell you what's going to happen. Um, and then the whole point is that if you don't free the mouse, the next time you come into the room, it's dead. If you do free the mouse, you'll see it again later on. And we wanted to teach people right away that every time the game asks you something, you're not sure what's going to happen. It may not be what you expect, but something is going to happen. So I wanted to teach that with something that wasn't a major decision that you were going to be mad about, because you're like, well, I didn't even know what the hell was going on. I didn't even know that was how this game works. So we did it with the mouse first, and then once you saw that, oh, I get it, and it would also hopefully cause you to think like, well, what if I'd chosen the other option? What would have happened? So it was it was a safe choice. And in the console versions, the mouse represents the first trophy you can get in the game, and that was also a decision to sort of clue people in that, you know, choices you make and whatnot are going to affect how things play out.
Yes, and I do remember. I don't even remember how many times I had to play it, but that train part you're talking about, that that trophy that whoever I'm assuming you were talking with PlayStation about it, because I don't know how that works either for the trophy, but there was one, I don't even know if it even got fixed to this day, but the train trophy there.
Oh God, I hope it did.
That I mean, you can still get it, but it's more like a hit or miss. Like you're either gonna have to play it more than one time to hopefully unlock it, or you're gonna maybe get it the first try, which is gonna be like, you know, like I said, the 50-50 chance. However, what I did find is the PS Vita version, everything unlocks perfectly.
Oh boy.
But that train trophy for PS4 definitely took me probably 5 times. I remember I was like, oh my god.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I'm gonna go speak to my programmer and fire him immediately.
Oh geez,
for being such a hack.
Well, I don't even know if it even got fixed. I mean, it's hard to. Well, actually, no, I don't even think it had gotten fixed, because I forgot when Tesla was playing it. I think we did everything right, and I don't even think it popped. But anyway, we're not here to talk about firing Benjamin's helper here. We're talking about the next game that is actually in the works by you, which is Worse Than Death. Now, how long has Worse Than Death been in development now?
Right. So we just launched. It just launched on iOS. The first version came out on iOS on July 1st. And that's the first release of the game. And so from beginning to that release, it was, I guess, about 18 solid months, just about almost 2 years. Wow. It's about 2 years since I've been thinking about it constantly, but some of the time in the middle there was spent sort of dealing with other things as well. Alone with you took us like way too long. It took us like 2.5 years, which is quite a long time to be on one project. And obviously Home was a lot shorter, and we wanted to bring that time down with Worse Than Death and get like a much sort of tighter development schedule.
Very cool. Well, I don't really have an iOS because I don't believe in that stuff. But anyway, I'm an Android person. Well, so what is Worse Than Death about, and how were you really inspired to make this once again dark game as we're calling it.
Right. So Worse Than Death is an action adventure horror game about a high school reunion that goes horribly wrong. And a lot of it was, like I mentioned before, just a desire to return to horror and make something scary again. Just really wanted to make. I just like, oh, I had another horror story in me, and I thought, yeah, I kind of want to jump in and make something creepy again. And so we went through a lot of design uh, iteration to figure out what kind of game we wanted to make. Like, I liked Home, but I didn't want to make Home 2, like, specifically. I didn't want to make a game that was using the exact same gameplay mechanics of sort of uncovering the story. Because I felt like once you know how Home works, or once you've played it, like as many times as you have, to play Home 2, like a direct Home 2, you would kind of know how it all works. It wouldn't have that same surprise. But again, as someone who loves horror and is, was playing like a dozen horror games sort of between one game and the next, I kept thinking like, there's got to be something else I can do. And I do love 2D horror. So one thing I noticed about a lot of other horror games is that they're often very, very slow, especially indie ones. Like they're about moving, navigating, maybe hiding, but they're usually about waiting a lot. And I really like the idea of doing a game that did have monsters, that did have like an enemy that you were avoiding or dealing with. But I didn't just want to copy like a bunch of other indie horror games that have come out where you're just sort of doing a lot of waiting, doing a lot of slow walking, and progressing with like a very, very deliberate pace. I want to make a game that was like just totally rock and roll, where you were always panicking. You were just like freaking yourself out, but not because of like the slow dread necessarily, but because you would know that there's something in the room and you screw up and you go, oh God, and you're running and you're kind of making a mess of it, and you're probably doing way worse because you're panicking instead of just like playing it cool. So we prototyped the game very quickly. It only took about 2 months, I guess, to sort of do a bit of a game jam and figure out what we wanted to do. And the prototype was the main character, Holly, which I think was basically just the character from Home at that point, just because I had the sprites, and making a kind of Metal Gear style stealth system where you are hiding, you can sneak, the enemy can hear you, it can track you, it can go on patrol, it can sort of, return from patrol and do a bunch of those sort of stealth mechanic things. And I prototyped a basic version of that and said, like, this is actually really fun. And then we started digging into like the pile of stories that we had that we wanted to talk about. And my wife Nancy really took the lead on this, where she's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every time you talk about Home, people ask you, so what really happened? So we're going to make a game where no one's going to question what really happened, but we're going to leave a bunch of other things for them to think about. Instead, what we want to do is just have them like freaking out all the time, because it's like more in your face scary and more visceral. So Nancy I would always say like, okay, well, like maybe I'm going to have this scene with like a lot of like subtle, slow pans and this and that. And she's like, no, like just buckets of blood. Just make it way more simple and visceral and exciting. So we used the joke that we used was like we looked at TV shows like X-Files, and we looked at more modern shows like Riverdale, because Riverdale is like all high melodrama, like it's very silly, because like no one's ever like a little bit upset. Someone's always like really upset, or there's always like some major drama between characters. It's very goofy. But with X-Files, like, like Mulder and Scully are always running from one scene to the next. Nothing ever happens without them running between scenes, or without a giant like dun 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 moment, and then they're like, oh my God, the person who's been in the factory this whole time was so and so, and then they got to run to go catch him. And so we kind of took those two elements, and those are like the bullet points that we said everything in this game is that you're running. There's a desperate revelation. There's some shocking thing that you uncover. There's lots of blood, and it should just be a constant fright fest from beginning to end.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to this, because I remember when I believe it was when you were first maybe announcing it, or maybe it was like a little bit on. I don't remember when I first actually heard about Worse Than Death, but it was cool that I was like, oh, Benjamin is back making another game. I was wondering what was going on, and like, I know you were indie, but I was just like, well, I think it's been a while anyway, and I was just like, huh. I wonder how long. I think I was more like, I wonder how long this has been talked about now or something. So I honestly don't remember how I found out that you were working on a new game or something. So, um, but kudos to you for that, for coming back, because we definitely need more originality when it comes to really anything horror nowadays. I will say. And I think what you were trying to say earlier is, are you not really much of a fan of the slow burn build up for the most intense action? I guess is what I was trying to figure out, is what you were saying. That's why you were kind of like saying, this is more like in your face panic, not really, well, not really in your face panicking, but it's more like, up front for the action, rather than, okay, well, this is the slow burn, and you got to build it up before it actually happened. So would that sort of the idea that I'm getting?
Well, I would. I mean, that's what we were going for the game for sure. I definitely still love my slow burn horror games, but it was kind of like there were some games that I played over the past few years that I thought did them so well that I realized, oh, I don't want to compete with that. Like
Oh, gotcha.
this game is so good, and I was looked like one of my favorite horror games is Detention, and I was looking at it going like, oh my god, they really nailed this. Like they really got what so many other indie horror games try to do, but they did an excellent job, and they sort of took it another step further and really understood, and it's excellent. And I thought, like if I just tried to make a game that felt like this, I know I couldn't do it justice the way they did, because they had like a cool hook and a bunch of other really nice features. But then I was looking at a bunch of other games as kind of both as research, but just because I was just jumping back into play a bunch of stuff that I'd missed over the years. And that's when I realized, like, oh man, a lot of this stuff is like very slow and very deliberate. And when I would play, sometimes I would get frustrated because I would say like, oh, like this is fun in a way, but it feels like a lot of work to get through for again these certain games that I was playing. And I was like, I really love games like Resident Evil that are like extremely balanced, where you're both equally scared and tense and somehow on a bit of a roller coaster and whatnot. And depending on the scene, you might be one of those things or all of them combined, but there's a real amazing balance to that. And I thought that's something I just want to try, because there's a bit of a design challenge to say, like, can we do that? Can I make a game that sort of like has all these flavors and still tastes great?
No, I understand what you're trying to say. Yeah, when you meet, it's like film. Once you see that one particular film, it's just like, oh, well, if I make a film in that same exact universe, then I need to be careful, because I definitely know my film is going to be compared to this film. And in this case, it's like vice versa with this, where you're like, oh, well, and if I make something like this, it's definitely going to be compared to this if I do justice or not. So, yeah, it's always hard, and it's always cool though to get inspired by different techniques in a game too. Like, we see a lot of games now using the, craft your own stuff,
Right.
getting the material, whereas before you just got the whole item and that's it. You didn't have to worry about crafting. So the gaming industry had changed so much, just like with filming. And you know you also got to look at what really can we really do that nobody has done before anyway, which is probably the hardest thing anyway, because I think almost anything, really, everything has almost been done. And if not, what hasn't been done that people need to um, do more to help shine more light of a different technique, I guess I want to say, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it is you find gaps in something, and like as a designer, that's usually just me playing things and saying like, "Oh, I like this," but man, I wish this had X, or I wish this didn't have X, and I wish there was more of this. And then sometimes you look around, and it's like, well, maybe there's an opportunity to make something that has the things that I like and doesn't have the things I don't like, and attract the same people who also sort of want that. And that was one of the reasons too why we didn't want to just make like a literal home too, because part of it was like, can I make a better version of home? I mean, I could definitely make a prettier version, one that's higher res, one that uses a bunch of cool animation techniques, things like that. But at the time, the idea was, no, like home exists for a reason. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, and unless I really shake that up in a meaningful way, it would just kind of feel like I'm just doing, making like a half-ass sequel. But what's worse than death, it was like, you've got this, for me, it was super exciting because I'm like, now there's enemies. Now there's an entire stealth system. Now there's like a stamina bar and the panic thing, and like a heartbeat you have to worry about. And there's like 3D positional audio, and there's like this high-res art that we throw in the mix, and there's like full-screen puzzles and all this kind of stuff that I just love doing and like love seeing in other games. And that was super exciting. And sometimes when you make games, you can get carried away just making stuff that you want to play. But then again, when you play games that are made like that, you can kind of feel the heart behind them. And as a small studio, it's kind of what we do.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much, Ben, but I am curious now that since you just mentioned it. So you mentioned the heartbeat thing, stamina, of course, we had, and then you mentioned, I believe, one more thing, right? The panic. Is there a way that you can tell us more about that, or is that like like material where it's just like, well, maybe you should wait and see?
Well, I mean, again, if you're playing it on iOS, you'll get to see all that stuff. If you we have trailers on the website that show off a bunch of that stuff too.
Oh,
but
okay.
the main hook is that we want to just like with home, we really want to use sound in a cool way, like really freak you out with awesome sound. So the way the game works is, as you play as Holly, and as she's sort of going around her environments, we freak you out with sound that happens all around you, and we sort of mess with your head a little bit. But when you come across these creatures that you can't see but you can hear, you have to use the environment around you to track them. So it's a bit like Stranger Things, where all the lights in the environment react to a monster. So they're flickering as they get closer. You're hearing the sound sort of swell. You can hear their voices. They're muttering things, and all these other sort of sound effects play. And you can track them in the space, whether they're to your left, to your right, close, far, all that kind of stuff. And then the lighting around you changes to reflect their position as well. But you have this thing that at the bottom of the screen that we call a panic bar, and it starts off white, and it shows how much stamina you have, because you can run and it depletes as you run, and if you deplete it completely, you get tired, and then you have to wait a bit, and it kind of slows you down. But you can manage that to sort of like run and burst and not panic too much. But the bar also changes color, and it pulses along with Holly's heartbeat. So as a monster gets closer to you, your heart is just like hammering in your ears, super loud. And it gets faster and faster, and then the panic bar at the bottom is pulsating at the same rate, so that hopefully, again, like what we always like to do, is you're basically just freaking yourself out, because the sound and the visuals, you're like, oh god, oh god, oh god, and like, oh please, and we kind of make the moment a whole lot more stressful for you because of all the feedback that you're getting. And it's a real simple way to add that element that gives you something to manage and track and pay attention to, without adding like a ton of user interface stuff, or like a bunch of meters, or all this sort of other stuff that clutters up the screen. It's just one little element.
Very nice. And just to also clarify for the panic thing, now does it also work the same way, where if you're trying to calm yourself down, like, is it, I know with most games sometimes if you're panicking or whatever, depending on the situation, they always say like, well, if you always want to get less stressful, you want to go into a lit up room. Now is that how you what's that word I'm looking for? Kind of like
calm yourself down?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. We don't actually have that feature, but now that you mention it, now I want to add it in. Maybe that's because like most of the rooms of the game are like super dark. We focused on the running aspect that the game, because I wanted to make a game that played quickly. So you obviously walk, and when you see a monster, or when you encounter like an enemy, Holly automatically starts sneaking. Like she walks kind of tiptoes, and she has this cool little animation. But you can also run. But if you run within earshot, they'll hear you, which kind of just screws you over, and you got to try to get away. So a lot of the panic is that if you keep moving, your panic bar always fills up more slowly. So if you stand still, it'll always fill up faster. So if you're trying to get away from an enemy, like the more you push yourself, the harder it's going to be for you to sort of like regain that meter back and be able to do what you need to do in terms of like jumping over things and running it and whatnot. So we don't use the calm aspect that you mentioned, although that sounds absolutely awesome. But we do sort of subliminally teach people to chill out if they want to survive, because if they just start panic all the time, that meter isn't going to last, and they're going to just get caught and die. Good question. Good question. That was a tough one.
Yeah, I was just thinking of it because I know a lot of. Well, I don't know if a lot, but I have seen some where like light seemed to be like Friday the 13th game used it.
Right.
There's another horror game that is in early access right now that uses it called Visage. And then I think there might be one more. I don't know, but those are the two off the top of my head. But I kind of like that idea because, well, I haven't really seen it. Well, Visage works in a way where if you are in the dark for too long, your mind starts playing tricks on you and stuff like that, which I would definitely recommend checking it out, Benjamin, by the way.
Yeah, this sounds great.
And Friday the 13th, I like that, how they worked that in, where if you were scared from running into Jason, same thing, if you didn't have your flashlight on and you were in like a dark area for too long, your screen would actually become darker and like
you'd lose your map.
You would lose your map over time, and then the only way to get yourself to come back into the quote light unquote is by you would have to be around other survivors. You would actually have to go inside of a cabin or wherever, like a building, with lights on, just to have your stress level or your panic level to demolish, or not demolish. Geez, I'm crying. Why am I having a brain fart on that word? Like diminish. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So. And then after a little bit of time, your screen would come back to normal. Your map would actually start showing up again.
I love that stuff. I love when especially for horror games, when you get to use systems like that to essentially further the story and get people like way more involved.
Yeah, I always like that idea. And then like just because it's just like, okay, well, I get it, character, you're scared, come on, let's go, we're trying to save you here, come on. So
just like when you're watching a horror film and you're like, what are you doing? Don't go into that, like, don't open that door, you idiots. Oh god.
Well, I guess you want to die, so go ahead.
Yeah.
But anyway, Benjamin, is there anything that I did not touch? All right, take two. All right, Benjamin, is there anything that I have not touched on for anything that we have talked about that you would like to mention, or did we kind of cover everything okay? The only thing I'm just wondering now is, since Worse Than Deaf is on iOS, you said, when can we expect it for Steam and consoles?
So we are going to be talking about specific dates a little bit later. I have to take a bit of a rest because of a hand injury.
That's no fun.
Tell me about it. It is, it's still coming out. It's coming a little bit later this year for the other systems, and we'll be announcing some more specific kind of over the summer and whatnot. But it's not too far away. But yeah, I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on it, especially on like console. Everyone could freak themselves out. So yeah, it'll be coming out to Nintendo Switch, PS4, Steam, the Humble Store, and maybe a few surprises. After that.
I'm assuming like Nintendo Switch or something. That would be cool.
It'll definitely be on Switch. Yep.
Ooh. Are you yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Importing. Are you importing home or alone with you to like Switch at as well?
Oh, that is a good question. So we actually mentioned this on Twitter a little while ago. We very much want to put those games out on Switch. It's just right now an issue of time because we're so
Yep.
small. We can only do so much at once. So I definitely want to do it. We just got to make it happen when it's feasible to do so.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. But yes, Benjamin, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And we'll definitely have to have you on again when Worse Than Death comes out, because that way we can talk more about another scary horror game.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for having me on the show.
Well, you're very welcome. And for those listening to Benjamin, where can people keep up to date with everything?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Rivers. I'm on Instagram at Benjamin Rivers Inc., because we're a company, I guess. And you can check out Worse Than Death at worsethandeathgame.com.
All right. Well, there you go, people. Check it out. If you're not familiar with Benjamin Rivers, what is wrong with you? Just go check it out, because right now, at the time of this recording, you know what? I don't even know how much longer this sale even goes on for, but let's see. Hopefully, it'll be up in time. If not, well then, if, I guess you would miss out on getting home for I think I saw it as 67 cents or something on Steam.
Oh, probably. It's probably some crazy
So
low price.
yeah,
It's cheap no matter what.
yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it is cheap, but it is on sale for the Steam summer sale or whatever they call it. So
That's right.
So hopefully it's still on sale. If not, you just still get it anyway. I think it's like $3 for the original price anyway, but it's well worth it. It's got replayability just because of the multiple ending on top of the. I guess I would just say side stories, Ben. Right? Would I say side stories? So yeah, there's a lot of going on, a lot of stuff going on, and then once you're done with home, check out Alone with You, which I still need to do, which eventually I will get it on PS4, and then I'll be looking forward to Worse Than Death, and then we'll definitely have to have you back on, Ben. So thank you again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And for those listening, thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to lock your doors, lock your windows, cover up in a blanket with a flashlight, and make sure you have some type of weapon, because if not, you just never know what is working outside. And until next time, stay scary, everyone.